Dad, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. I mean, you're in the house on a regular basis.
Yep.
But in the green chair doing the podcast thing for the first time. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, we want to talk about a couple of things. We could talk about so many different things, and we'll talk about more on another episode. But for this episode, we're closing out 2020. Holiday season is upon us. We're thinking about that. We're thinking about this COVID era. We're thinking about all kinds of things. I thought two key topics, transitions and traditions. And both are really relevant, not only to us from a cultural standpoint, but to you even personally. On the tradition side, we'll talk in a moment about the family traditions that we did and how to create those meaningful things for your family or just for a spouse, significant other, in your job, in your workplace, wherever it's relevant. But also transitions. You've gone through a significant transition into quasi-retirement, from leading a church into this next season. So I thought that would be a good place to start. How can we think about, or how should we be thinking about transitions, whether they're forced on us or whether we're planning for them? What kind of guidance, wisdom can you give us as we think about the transitions in our lives?
Well, it's interesting because everybody is going to go through transitions, right? That's a given in life. So this isn't a subject that is really relevant for some people and not relevant for others, because no matter what you do or how you live, everybody goes through transitions.
So transition is coming.
It's coming.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's important to be prepared for it. So I have a few rules. I've transitioned. Sometimes we transition on purpose, and sometimes we don't transition on purpose, right?
Sometimes we get transitioned.
We get transitioned. That's right. So I've done both. I think that it's really important to be prepared for it. One, just recognize it's part of life, and it happens, and that's okay. Nothing stays the same forever. And then two, how do I manage it? So I have a couple of rules that I've tried to build in to really help me manage transitions in my life. The first one is to really know who you are. Where's your identity? Because if you get your identity out of a position or a job or a role, then you're going to be devastated when you lose that. For whether good reasons or bad reasons, because your identity, you're tied up into that role. So I feel like, where's my identity? For me, I find my identity in Christ, and that I belong to Him, that I'm God's child, that I'm a son, that my life is in Him. I kind of hold on to a couple of verses like Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And that's kind of who I am.
Yeah.
So my job, my role, my positions don't define me. I've already found my definition in who I am in Christ. So I hold on to that.
It's a struggle for so many people.
Exactly.
Because it's so easy in our culture of achievement and success and notoriety and social media following and everything else to just subtly, we don't do it on purpose, but just subtly, our identity begins to become what we do, what we're known for, what's made us successful, what's impressive, what they say about us. It feels like that just kind of creeps in. Do you find yourself having to actively war against that tendency to be known as the pastor of the church or as this guy, or all the way up from high school, homecoming king, just kind of one thing after another?
Yeah, it is easy to do that, and it's so funny because we also do that to each other. So in my last church, I remember when we planted the church, I thought people said, "Do you like to be called Dr. Anderson, Pastor Anderson?" I said, "How about Larry? Could we do Larry?" And it ended up being Pastor Larry because nobody could just call me Larry. And so you kind of get used to that. And all of a sudden, if you're not Pastor Larry, who are you? And can you go back to Larry? And so I've tried to be really intentional about those kinds of things. So when somebody asks me, Okay, how do you like to be addressed? I just say, Larry. That's my preference, but whatever makes you comfortable.
Well, unless they're willing to say Your Royal Highness.
Well, okay.
And then you might make an exception.
Occasionally Bishop, but yeah. So I'll make an exception. My favorite though is Grandpa. That's my
Grandpa might
favorite.
Be the best.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to be known right now. So I'll take that one any day. But and that reminds me, because I think one of the other really key ingredients through transitions is, particularly if it's a work-related transition, is to have a rich life outside of your job. That when your job and that role in your job becomes your life, then you're heading for trouble there as well. And so I've always made it one of my goals to have a rich life outside of my job, enjoy my family, enjoy my relationship with my wife, to have good friends outside of my job that I enjoy being with. And so, when we first moved as a family to Los Angeles, those first few years job-wise were horrible. They were so hard. And I always would tell people, if I can go home and close the door and my boys are there and my wife still loves me, I'm fine. Life's good, right? Because what else really matters? And so to have, I always felt like that kind of taught me to have a rich life outside of my job, that was a big piece of it for me. So that was a key ingredient. I think another thing for me was to remind myself that your transition begins the first day. When you guys were growing up and everybody was playing soccer, I had a little thing that I would tell you the beginning of the season, and the joke is, I used to tell you guys this. None of you probably remember it, but that was significant.
Well, we were young.
That's right.
The soccer days were early years.
That's right. So I would say to you, how do you want your coach to remember you at the end of the season?
Yeah.
And you can't control, and that was part of just trying to help you understand. Control what you can control, and you can't control who's the best player, or you can't control who scores the most goals. But what you could control is that Caleb was a really hard worker, and he always did what I told him to do the first time. So if you can do those two things, your coach is going to have great memories of you, and your teammates are going to have great memories of you. So focus on those two things. Work really hard and respond the first time. And so
and even if we didn't remember that conversation, the principles, the spirit of it had an impact on us, because all three of us were loved by our coaches.
Yeah.
I think every stop that we made, and even quickly became the captain of all those teams. Not always because we were the best. At USC, I sat the bench, but still was captain because we just cared about people and cared about, doing what we were asked to do and working really hard. And so I like that. Think about your transition on day one, that you're going to show up and almost like build your legacy from the get-go. There's probably a lot of people that start thinking about their transition when they're forced to at like 55 or 65 or whatever. But thinking about it from the very beginning, beginning with the end in mind.
That's exactly right. And you can't control, when you're kind of coming to the end, you can't control your legacy. You can't control or change how people think about you, but you can start that on the first day and ask yourself, when this comes, because everything will come to an end, how do I want to be remembered by the people above me, by the people below me, by my peers, and start there and work hard at it, because part of transitions that give them meaning is the relationships that you leave behind, the relationships that stay with you, and that's a great indication of the kind of transitions that you're going to have. I also think that I always look at transitions as opportunities. So when we transitioned to empty nesters, I looked at that as an opportunity for your mom to get to do more stuff with me, and go places with me, be more part of the ministry with me, whatever it was that we were doing at the time. When I look at transitioning from one role or one job to another, I saw that as an opportunity to grow, to get better, to have a new adventure. And I don't think we can, spend very much time looking back. I think that you want to learn the lessons that you need to learn, but then you need to start looking forward and treat it as an adventure. People who are in the ministry, we have often, and maybe most people are like this, a responsibility gene that gets way overdeveloped somewhere along the way.
Responsibility complex.
Yeah. And so I tell friends of mine that, really sometimes the Lord just has to blow you out of there.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to let it go on your own.
Yeah.
You feel like you're the only one that can do it. You feel like everything's your responsibility. Everything falls on you.
Obligated to deliver, pleasing people.
Yep.
There's just all that woven in.
All of it woven in. And so sometimes transitions are, I tell people regularly, sometimes the Lord just needed to roll a hand grenade in there and blow you out of it because you weren't gonna get the message on your own. And so with our last church, I had a mantra that I came into it, and in fairness, I'd lived a long time already, but I had this idea that I wanted to step down from the church a day before anybody else thought of it. So I started thinking about my transition early on, and then when I felt like the time was coming, we did a new strategic plan and vision casting and all this, and I looked at it and I thought, this is really great, but I'm not going to do it. So we need to start the clock here. So I went to the staff and the elders and I said, here's the timeline. We got to get serious about this because I'm not going to be the guy to finish this. We need a younger guy in here.
Yeah, I watched that, and I've watched it in some other places too, and you did it exceptionally well. The humility that you displayed was remarkable, and that commitment to wanting to transition before anyone else thought that you needed to transition was apparent and humble and wise. And you set the next guy up for success by not clinging to anything. It was just embracing the transition that was due, and looking at the next season as an adventure. I'm sure served you in that, but you really did it in a way that honored everybody involved. And so it was kind of like a miraculous thing. Like when it happened, people were sorry to see the transition and excited because you had set everything up to continue to move on without you.
Yeah.
It was remarkable.
Well, and I think humility is a really undervalued leadership principle because at the end of the day, it's not about us, right? Mm-hmm. And if we can learn how to let go of things, not hold on to things, and one of the things I read years and years ago was that a great leader is totally committed to the success of those under him. Mm. And how do I focus on the success of the people underneath me, alongside me, putting a younger guy in there? How do I create an environment for his success? Because really, when you think about it, I wanted my legacy. Part of my legacy was for him to be wildly successful, and so what good is a legacy if everything falls apart when you're gone, or if everything fails? And somehow I think people sometimes feel like they're sad because everybody gets along really well without them. To me, that's a victory.
That's
right?
a win.
That's a total win, right? If they're doing well and ministry's happening, people are happy and excited about the future, then to me that you've done your job. Now the irony is that they called it retiring from my church, but when you've had a really good transition, nobody will let you retire, because every church that starts a transition wants to call you and say, can you help us?
Well, and I'm sure that's not just church, right? That's probably anywhere. Anyone who does it right and leaves their organization in a good place is going to be sought after to lead something else, to transition something else, to consult somewhere else. Yeah. So that's what you're seeing. Yeah. They won't let you retire.
Exactly. Well, and one of the other things about transitions is that a company, a church, an organization is like being at a train station. And when you step off that train, fairly soon that train's going to take off again, and you're going to be off the train. You're going to be standing in the platform of the train station, and you're going to, well, I thought all these people were my friends. Where did everybody go?
It's jolting that it keeps going, right?
It's exactly right, but that's how it's supposed to be. That's how life is supposed to be, and you've got to celebrate the fact that the train kept going, and it's not a loss. It's a win. And, your friends are still going to be your friends. And, from the transitions we've made, we have wonderful friends. And, it's not everybody. We don't see everybody all the time like we used to, but we're still blessed with great relationships. And to me, if I was sitting at home feeling bad about my phone not ringing because I stepped off the train, that's no way to live your life. You got to celebrate the fact that train kept going.
Yeah,
and it's doing well. So those are great wins for me, and great affirmations regarding transitions. And so I feel bad when it's hard for people, because we just need a refocus.
Yeah.
A check on kind of how we're viewing the transition and what it really means.
Yeah.
I've told younger guys a lot over the years that, there's 3 leadership choices that everybody has to make. And you've heard them, sadly, way too many times. But the first one applies to this. It's choose impact over position. And we get caught up in titles, and we get caught up in roles and positions and places. And rarely do people really think about, where can my life have the most impact?
Yeah.
And
even if I don't get the credit.
Exactly.
This is going to be an impact. This is going to make a difference. This is God using how I'm designed for the greater good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a friend, I was with some friends a while back, and one of them, he's really gifted. He's a writer and speaks all over the world and written dozens of books. And we were walking out of this restaurant, and he said, Larry, I really admire you. And he said, nobody's calling me to help them figure out a transition, or to figure out what to do next, or to walk them through a tough deal, but they're calling you all the time. And I said to him, here's the deal. I have quiet gifts and you have public gifts. And so my quiet gifts are, how can I come alongside people and help them through this transition, help them be successful, help them work their way out of some kind of situation. And you're speaking to thousands of people and writing books and using your, public gifts. And he really did appreciate that. It felt good to him. But for me, it's always been about choose impact over position. And here's how God's made me, and here's how I can have the greatest impact. And it's never been about position. Just real briefly, the other 2 are choose discipline over talent. We all have given a certain amount of talent, but if you don't discipline yourself to work through that, then you're going to hit a wall sooner or later.
Which we see everywhere. We see
All
that
the time.
everywhere. We see that in sports. Most glorified is people with crazy talent that can't do the work.
Yeah.
And they get to a high level, and then they flame out because they don't know, or we see it in other places.
Yeah.
Just personality gets you here, but then you don't have the habits, the routines, the network, the whatever to sustain the growth. So discipline over talent.
Choose discipline over talent. The third one is choose achievement over activity. So we have a tendency to want to fill up our calendar, and it feels good,
to be busy.
Yeah, it feels good to be busy. Everybody needs me. The question that we should ask ourselves on a regular basis is, what am I trying to achieve? What's really important? And those are the things. So fewer things, more important things in our calendar make a huge difference. And
back to your train analogy, am I just jumping from platform to platform, train to train to be busy and active? Or is this going somewhere? Is this going somewhere, creating value, creating meaning?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, for me at least, I have to be really intentional about things. And so I have those three things that I, kind of value is, am I making good choices in those leadership areas of my life? Am I thinking about transitions? I have passages of scripture that are sort of life scriptures that I go back to time and time again. I'm a compulsive journaler, and so I journal every day. I journal every morning.
Is this the current journal?
This is the journal. It's this leather bound, and every time you fill it up, you just pull the pages out and slip another into this leather sheath. And I probably have had this for 25 years.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, and I did too. You bought me a similar thing, and I used it probably for a decade. And I've more recently transitioned to something else that you use, which is the full focus planner.
Yeah.
And it's got the notes section on the right-hand side of every page. And I've just found myself using it for both purposes.
Yeah.
The planning and the note-taking or journaling. And it just kind of condenses. But yeah, I modeled that after you and have had a journal at least since the day I went off to college.
Yeah. So I try to, it's like, you try to build good habits in, right? And try to be intentional. I think sometimes we wait for life to happen to us rather than being intentional about, okay, what's important. And, my intentionality is never about getting famous or being rich. It's about, okay, how can I use what God's given me to the, most impactful way? How can I, make sure my family knows they're first, and in my ministry, and it's not everybody else. And I find I'm just lazy enough that if I'm not intentional about things, if I don't really think, about those things, that I'm just going to roll with, I'm a nice person. You guys ought to like me because I'm a nice person, and let life happen. And that's rarely a good idea. So, yeah.
Intentionality is, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And, one of the things when we moved, when you were 9, we moved from Phoenix to Los Angeles, and somebody said to me, how can you move your boys from heaven to hell? Move from Phoenix, such a great city, to Los Angeles.
Los Angeles represented hell.
Exactly. And of course, I was a guy that grew up and lived his whole life in Phoenix. But I said, how about this? How could I raise my sons to say, and tell them someday, you know what? I really felt like God was calling us to LA, where there was a huge need, and I was afraid to take my family there because of what might happen to them. Is that what I really want to teach my sons about their life and about, how to respond to God's call and about leadership? And I said, no, I think I want them to see that you can do this any place, if that's where you're supposed to be. And so to treat it as an adventure, and not with fear. And I think we let fear drive us so often.
Well, and let's just do a little parenthetical pause and say that when you moved over there, it was to work with this organization called Young Life. You had built up Young Life to a healthy place in Arizona and New Mexico, and then you were going to LA that was at that time kind of an organizational train wreck,
right,
with a handful of people on staff. And then after 16 years, there were 120 people on staff with thousands and thousands of volunteers and everything like that. So it wasn't just like, oh, we're not going to play it safe and stay in our little, safe place. We're going to go here and we're going to let who we are and how we operate and our intentionality change things. Exactly. It's not that culture is going to change us, it's we're going to change it. And the ripple effect that decision made, not just for us as kids, but for thousands of people, is significant. And then vice president of Young Life and continued on, right? There's the ripple effect because of that bold decision is dramatic.
Yeah. And for me, it was really difficult. But again, if I could come home and close the door and you guys were good, and during those years, I coached soccer for 12 years because I knew twice a week had to be home by 4 to get one of you guys or all three of you for a soccer practice, and on Saturdays I was going to be at a soccer game, and I turned down speaking engagements, weekend things, retreats and things because I was coaching soccer, and I only let myself miss one game a season. And so to try to be intentional about those things, and and Young Life did just fine with that. It was okay. And so how do we, if we live out those principles, that when it comes to making a transition, I just feel like you weren't defined by it. You're leaving, pretty healthy legacy. The joke was when I got to LA, there were about 15 staff, and I had to preach it down to 5, and then we were 105 when I left. But but that's just. But I don't think you can do that, unless you got a healthy life outside of all of that.
Yeah.
And that carries you whether you stay or go. Your family's still your family, right? And your friends are still your friends, and your walk with Christ is still your walk with Christ, and that really sustains, at least for me, through all the transitions.
That's a good segue, because there's something else that you were really intentional about that was both a transition and a tradition.
Yeah.
And that was, you had a conviction about markers, that you wanted to create a marker in your son's life, my life, Josh's life, Aaron's life, when we turned 16, because you felt like there weren't enough markers. And this represented like a transition from boyhood to manhood. We want to leverage this transition, and we want to create a marker to say, hey, this represents something significant happening here.
Yep.
So just because it was so personal and significant for me, I'll kind of explain what it is, and then you can fill in the context of why and how people could apply it in different ways. But when we turned 16, you had a bunch of the significant adults in our life write us a letter of, hey, from their perspective, what it means to become an adult. In my case, a man.
A godly man, actually.
A godly man, following God, being who we're designed to be. What does that look like? So I got a notebook of all of these letters from these men and women saying, hey, here's what I see in you. Here's my experience. Here's what you can look for. And then a bunch of them, maybe like 8 of them, met us for a weekend in the desert. And we did this little weekend retreat. And you brought me those letters from 30 or 40 people, but books from these 8 guys. And they had books that they wrote in that this was a book that was significant to them, that helped them transition, that helped them grow up, that helped them understand God in a meaningful way. And so we had that cool weekend together that I could always look back on, that marker for a transition from boy to man. Those guys and those women in my life that wrote to me and that played that pivotal role. And that was significant, not just for me, but for Josh, for Aaron, and then for a bunch of other kids whose dads copied you. And what a great thing. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And as someone else that maybe they have a kid, or maybe they have just a nephew or a niece or someone that they invest in, talk a little bit about the why and maybe how they could apply it now in 2021.
Yeah, well, one of my convictions, and partially it was because I had 3 sons, and I felt like that young men weren't getting the kind of markers that they used to get, and that there was no celebrating different stages of life. And how could we celebrate moving from being a boy to being a man? What would that look like? And I chose 16 because that's when you were getting your driver's license. And I think all 3 of you probably got your driver's license on your birthdays.
Yeah, we were ready. We were in a hurry.
That was part of the deal. And so I thought, how do we do this, and how do we make this memorable, significant, and at the same time, I think, create a little bit of a tradition of, at least for our family. So we did it 3 times, but I picked out men that and some women to write those letters that I felt like were influencers in your life. And then that group that we did for the weekend, what I told them was we were going to start the weekend with, having them read their letters to you, going through all the other letters, having them give you a book and telling you why. So they're starting your adult library, and then we're going to pray with you. And I remember, because you asked them some great questions as part of that time. So it was really, I think it was meaningful to you. It was meaningful to me, certainly. I think it was just as meaningful for the other guys that were there, because most of them have done those weekends since then.
For their own
kids. Yeah. And but then after we finished that part, then it was, okay, Caleb, welcome to the club. Let's go play. So what did we play? Bocce?
Oh, yeah.
We were in this development resort kind of deal, and we just said, throw it wherever you want, next guy up, and then we're going to play bocce. So we played all over
all over the resort.
Yeah, the resort complex. And then we swam, but it was more about, okay, welcome to the club now, Caleb, you're in. We're going to go play.
Yeah. And
I thought that was a significant time, because it was also entering into that, okay, here's how we, a bunch of men are going to go have some fun together.
Yeah.
And go to dinner.
Which is equally important.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Being in a place where you can be yourself, guys that you trust, have fun, enjoy your life, not take it too seriously, which is, still a struggle for me, but I've grown. I'm getting there.
And you've got Hillary to help you.
And I've got it. That's why.
That's right.
It's one of the brilliant things about marrying Hillary is she's helped me a great deal. But yeah, just playing and having fun and doing that kind of stuff that was a big part of it.
Then
I remember that.
You and I agreed that you weren't going to share any of the weekend, talk about it with your brothers. But then you got to be one of the men when your two brothers had their weekends.
Yep.
And then you and Josh got to be part of that group
for the youngest Aaron's.
And so we kept it as a special time. We kept it, what we do, is a secret between us. And then we initiated each of them into it. And so it was a really special time, I think for all three of you. Collectively, you have that shared memory, but each one of you had your own experience.
And since then, friends of ours have done that for their daughters.
Yeah.
At 16, at 15, I've heard. The point is, where do you anticipate a transition, and how can you create a marker to make that transition more significant?
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, and for you guys, I felt like you're going to get behind the wheel of a car, a 4,000-pound missile, and I wanted you to understand that you had moved into a different phase of your life, and this was about how do I become a man, and what does it take to be a godly man, and to really start thinking about that transition in your life. And one of the things that I wanted you to always think about was, who were the men around me when I did, and that those faces would pop up in critical times in your life. And as an adolescent, recognizing there was going to be a point where just because the old man said it, that's not good enough anymore. I need to know why, and I need to. And so, who were the faces that were going to pop up?
Yeah.
And I wanted to be intentional about who those faces were.
Yeah.
So
people that we were inviting to speak into our life.
Exactly.
The guys that were at that weekend, and even writing the letters and having their voices, their faces pop to mind, and say, it's not just because mom and dad said. There's like this community around me that informs my decision making. And
you're still really close to some of those guys. I mean, those men are lifelong.
Most of them.
Yeah, lifelong friends and trusted. And I think that's part of the beauty of it, is that even if you don't see one of them for a few years, if you called them, it would be like you saw them yesterday. I mean, those relationships are really cemented. And so that's been, and it's been fun to, to have the four of us, you and your brothers and me, be invited to somebody else's weekend, some other kids' weekends with their dads. And so that's been a real privilege over the years to be able to do that too.
Yeah, you mentioned 16 and driving. What am I going to do for my kids who are probably never going to drive a car? They're all going to be autonomous, and I'm going to have to. Maybe it's still 16. Maybe I have to back it up a little bit, or forward a little bit, or something like that. Because I just don't think driving a car is going to be an anomaly when my kids are older. We'll have to think of some other kind of significant marker.
Well, and there will be, and the other thing that you'll probably think about is, should you do it younger?
Yeah.
Because kids, because of internet and all of that, kids getting exposed to things so much younger. And, you may want to do this at 12 or 14 or something. But.
Okay. Speaking of being kids, let's talk more about traditions now. We got these Christmas stockings hanging behind. One has fallen down, and that's driving producer Paul crazy because there's 5 of us in my family and only 4 stockings.
I see the tape there.
Yeah. But we've got the tree, we've got the stuff that we've started to do. We've followed in line with some of the traditions that you established when we were young. And so as we're coming up, it's Christmas season, people are watching, maybe they have kids, maybe they don't. Nevertheless, traditions are fun and important, and we're not going to let COVID-19 ruin our Christmas traditions.
Right.
So what are some conviction around the tradition aspect of it, and then just a couple of your favorite that you introduced for our family?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate the tradition that Hillary's established of, let's start Christmas in April. Get the lights up. She gets a jump on it. It's really fun. And I think it's so, it's whimsical. It's fun. She does start early, but not April. I'm kidding,
November 1st at the latest.
Yeah. And you know what? And you're going to go to all that work. Might as well enjoy it, right?
Might as well.
So no, but here's the thought behind it is I wanted to be intentional about what are my sons going to remember about being home? What are they going to remember about home, about their parents, about life in our house? What are they going to want to reproduce? And it's not so much reproducing the things we did, but it's understanding how important traditions are in a family and the kind of security and healthiness that it gives your kids and stability and all those things. So we came up with some traditions, and my favorite Christmas tradition was our Christmas safari.
Christmas safari is awesome. And it makes no sense, but that's part of the genius of it.
Exactly. So we would go into your bedroom, take the 3 boys, Mom, we'd go into your bedroom. Everybody have to put a helmet on, right?
Just some kind of helmet costume.
Yeah.
Producer Paul loves that.
Yeah, anything. It could be a football helmet. It could be whatever. If we had a safari helmet, somebody got to wear that. But it was just some kind of helmet and a flashlight. And then I had gone through the house and strategically placed stuffed animals in different places through the house, down the hallway.
And always up on top of a door jamb, like a door frame. So that when the door opened up, the stuffed animal would fall.
It would attack you.
That's
right. So I'm making up a story as we go. We're crawling on our hands and knees through a completely dark house with our flashlights and our helmets. And you got to have a helmet in case the animal drops right on your head.
Right.
So I'm making up a story as we go, and we're on a safari, and the story progresses until we get right to the Christmas tree. And we get the Christmas tree, we flick the lights on, and we've got sleeping bags. And so we did this always on December 23rd, and then we would sleep under the Christmas tree that night. And then on the 24th, we'd wake up and we would go to the Village Grill for breakfast. And that's just one of those greasy, cheesy little places
spoon diner. But in Old Town Claremont, that's super cool. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
That was fun.
And you guys could go in your pajamas and we could eat pancakes or whatever it was and just have a time. So the Christmas safari became one of our traditions. And for me...
And we've all replicated it, by the way. Me, Josh, Aaron, we've all continued to do it. And this will be the first year, I think, that in my family that we'll be doing it with like all 3 can appropriately participate.
Exactly.
Edie's 3, she can like get into it. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Well, and with the ages of your boys, with 7 and 5, this safari could go anywhere, right?
Anything could happen.
That's right. That's right. It could take on a whole new tradition, which is really fun. And frankly, for me, just the sheer fun of it was part of the deal, that we were doing something made no sense, that was fun, that was just our family. The only concession I made was as we got a little older, as you guys got a little older in elementary school, I'd get everybody to sleep and then I'd hop up on the couch. I wouldn't stay on the floor all night.
No, that's a concession that Hillary and I made from day one.
Yeah, exactly.
Year one, we're not doing that part of it.
But so that's a great tradition. One of the other things we did, back in the day, we would do TGIF. Remember that?
Yeah.
And so on Friday nights,
Full House, Family Matters, Perfect
Urkel.
Strangers.
Yep.
Those were the go-to.
We watched those shows. We'd make popcorn or we'd have cookies or something, and we'd see if we could cram the whole family onto one couch or spread out over the chair. And these days it's so different. You guys growing up never had a TV larger than a 27-inch. There was no HD, but we would be there with our popcorn and having TGI Friday and watching those crazy shows. But it was really just sometimes we'd have another family that would join us, but it was really just a tradition that I felt like, we're all together. And how many years do we get to do this? Because you guys were gonna, at some point we were gonna be at basketball games on Friday nights and football games on Friday nights, and so that time was a window that we had to have that tradition. But it was really, it was really meaningful to me. So one of the other traditions that I really value that your mom pulled us into was she found these "You Are Loved" plates. You remember the "You Are Loved" plates?
Oh yeah, we've got them.
You have them right now because she bought enough for everybody.
Yeah, we've got one.
And again, the fun of it's being random, right? I mean, you get a "You Are Loved" plate for your birthday. We have, you get the plate, and we all celebrate your birthday.
And so we're at dinner, and if it's my birthday, I'm eating off the plate that says on the plate, "You are loved."
Exactly.
And it could be my birthday. It could be a good report card. It could be some other cool thing that happened.
Yeah. First day of first grade, you get the plate. First soccer goal, you get the plate, right? I mean, again, I think the issue was it didn't have to be that big of a deal. It was just an excuse to celebrate and to celebrate one of you, and everybody got their turn, and that was really fun. The other thing that she did is she got that bear jar. Yeah. And everybody, including your old man, we'd roll our eyes, but okay, we'll do the bear jar. But it became a tradition that we've given those, we've sold those at our churches, because you write these great questions and you open the bear jar and you pass it around. Everybody has to pick out a question. And
when you're a teenager, this is a nightmare.
That's
you're like,
agony.
Oh my God, really, Mom, the bear jar? But there's somewhere like in your soul where you also secretly like it, right? Yeah. You're connecting, you're talking, you're sharing, and most teenagers, they grunt, they don't really talk. Yeah. So like forcing that out is good. Yeah, I remember it. Bear jar game.
Yeah, but there's a lost art to family meals together. Yeah. And knowing how to create conversation. Yep. And so what I realized was that the bear jar was helping us, creating a tradition that you guys knew that when that bear jar came, we were going to talk and we were going to ask questions of each other and listen to each other, give each other a hard time, part of the deal. But that became a really important tradition for us. Yep. And then I had a couple of others. One that I thought, I always had this idea, that I wanted to be your first coach because I wanted to make sure that your first experience was a really fun one. And you learned some stuff. It wasn't about wins and losses, which I made that perfectly clear because we lost most of it.
So we lost a lot of games.
Yeah, except for your first, when you started, but it wasn't about that. It was, but it was about let's have fun and let's learn some stuff about this, and so we kind of created some traditions of how we did that as a family. Yeah. So one of the things is that you guys had to go to your brother's stuff. And I'll never forget, it carried on into middle school, and Aaron had his time at the trumpet in middle school, and there was a trumpet concert, and the tradition was you go to your brother's stuff. And so you and your brother Josh were giving me a lot of grief about going to a junior high band concert, and there's good reason because it wasn't that good. But it was your brother, and I can remember saying, hey, he's been to all your stuff.
Yeah.
He's been, and I think the reward was that we lived that out because part of that tradition was we're each other's biggest fan. And you took that really seriously as a kid.
Yep.
But we're going to be each other's biggest fan, and this stuff matters. So we're going to go. And I think that the payoff that you guys weren't expecting was that here you big guys come in, and this little junior high band, and you're already a varsity basketball player and all this stuff, and you guys were rock stars. Nobody else's big brothers came to junior high band concerts, right? And there you were, cheering for your little brother. He's playing. It might have been the last time he ever played the trumpet, but
I barely remembered that he did. But the beautiful thing, the irony is that Josh and I had a lot of success in sports. Josh in football, me in basketball and volleyball. Aaron didn't as much in sports, but he is far more successful in music that has so much more longevity than us in our short-lived sports careers.
It's better for your knees.
Way better for your knees.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you forced us to go and support him, and you helped nurture great relationships between the three of us.
Yeah.
And we continue to be each other's biggest fan, and that's awesome.
Well, I know, I can remember a time when you guys were all at the house, and people would be asking you about, playing volleyball at USC, or, Josh was playing football, and you would get up and walk back to Aaron's room, get his guitar and bring it out and say, yeah, but you should hear Aaron play the guitar. And I felt like, that's for a dad, that's the big payoff of having a tradition of we're each other's biggest fan, and how do we live that out, and how do we nurture that, and you really got it, and I think that was significant, and it was really significant to the people. I don't even remember who's in the house at the time or what, but it was other benefit to that tradition is that your friends were all Aaron's biggest fans.
Yeah.
And Josh's friends were all Aaron's biggest fans because you guys modeled that.
Yeah.
And so they would come to Aaron's stuff, which I thought, who does that, right?
Yeah.
But it was you guys influence. I remember when Aaron was a freshman and I asked him, you were already out and Josh was a senior, and I said, Aaron, how's school going? And do you have some good friends? And he said, Dad, yeah, I do. But if I was, because Josh was a senior, he said, if I was as popular with my freshman friends as I am with the seniors, this would be it'd be awesome, and I realized, that's kind of how our family works, right? That's how it's supposed to be. And you kind of pass that down, and your friends picked up on it. And so that was a real gift.
It's a big deal.
So, yeah.
One more I thought of, in the spirit of Christmas, we would always drive around the neighborhoods. We would take one night and we would drive around and look at lights.
Yep.
And Mom would pack cookies and hot cocoa, and we would sip on that in the back of the car and drive around looking at lights. And we would go to one place that was really fancy and all done up, and you park your car and you walk through these cool neighborhoods that just kind of went to the nines in their Christmas lights. But that's a great one too. And you don't, whether you have kids or you don't have kids, that's a cool thing to do with anybody, is just get some snacks, go drive where some houses are, take it seriously, and drive through and enjoy the lights and the brisk, winter night air. And that's another tradition that we use.
Remember, we'd stop at that place, and they would make they were making the candy canes right there. And we'd hop out of the car and buy some candy canes and get them while they were warm. And and that's a COVID-proof tradition, right?
That's COVID certified.
That's right. Yeah. You can do that now. You stay in your car, and the Chino lights were famous, right, in our area.
That's right. And Alta Loma.
Alta Loma. You could go, and they were crazy about those.
Yeah.
And my hunch is you can find those wherever.
Anywhere. Right? Yeah. There's a neighborhood near you wherever you are that does that. And
if you're worried about social distancing, you don't have to get out of your car, right?
That's right.
That's a beautiful thing. Yeah. So no, those are great traditions, and I think that again, it's just how do you create memories? So this is what family is. This is safety. This is where I'm loved. Those kinds of things, and so I think it's really about creating those experiences.
Well, thanks for doing it. It's had a big impact on my life, and now my family models what you started for us. And I know a lot of other people are going to take different pieces of this conversation and apply it in their families and their life. So thanks for taking the time. Great, phenomenal stuff. And it's great to hear you kind of what I lived through. It's nice to hear you synthesize it in an hour and give people a lot of handles for ways that we can approach transitions and build traditions. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. So wonderful to be here. And I love this podcast. I love what you're doing. I'm bragging on it all the time. So thanks for, I was just assuming that you ran out of really interesting people, but bring in the old guy. But it's really fun to be here. So thank you.
Thank you.